Hello all. Now this video will be about the sample essay that you should have already read. So take just a minute, and if you haven't already, make sure that you've read the sample essay. Make sure that you have sort of a top 3 concerns. Think about if a student came in with this essay in the writing studio and wanted to be tutored on what to do next. Think about what you would do. So take a minute, pause this video if you need to. Okay. Now let's talk through the essay. So the student sits down, you've greeted the student, you've welcomed the student to the writing studio, you've made he or she feel comfortable, and now you have the essay in front of you. Now I am going to refer to the student as a she because she was one of my students. And she's laid the essay in front of you, and you're looking at the title page here, and if you watch the formatting video, then you should know that because this has a title page, it is in what style? APA. I hope that you got that correct. Also, you can see that it says nursing in the title. So even if you weren't sure enough about APA style to know that it has a cover page, you should know that the nursing major uses APA style here at Lipscomb, and so we're going to see a lot of that. Okay, so you've looked at the title page. Looks fine. You can check it if you want to later in the session, but this is not the time to check to see whether or not a title page is formatted correctly, unless the student just seems super worried about it and like they're not going to be able to move on unless you have done that. And then again, you would get out our APA guide from our handouts and use those to check it. Okay, so we get down into the body of the paper, and this is obviously the first paragraph, which makes it the introduction. That doesn't always mean that the paragraph that comes first will serve as an introduction, and then that's one of our jobs. So the next thing you do in a tutoring session is read the essay out loud. So you can read it out loud or the student can read it out loud. I'm going to assume that that has already happened. So now we look at this first paragraph, and you ask the student, where is your thesis statement? So look at the first paragraph and see if you can figure out the thesis statement of this paper. Can you find one? Okay, now comes the point where you realize you need to know what the assignment was, because you can't know whether or not there's a thesis statement unless you know what the assignment was that was given to the student. So after you greet a student, make him or her feel welcome in the studio, then you always ask about the assignment. Ask for the assignment sheet. If there is one, read it with the student, maybe even before you read the paper aloud. That'll give you an idea if the student's meeting the assignment. Or if the student does not have an assignment sheet, he or she wasn't given one, or they did not bring it with them, then the next thing that you would do is ask the student to describe what he or she thinks that the class is supposed to do. Okay. So the assignment for this paper was for the student to describe how she will write in her major or in her career. So the things that she needs to know about writing in order to be a successful nursing major and or a successful nurse. Okay, so knowing that, look again at the first paragraph. Is there a thesis? Okay, so what I would assume from looking at this first paragraph is that if there is a thesis, it was probably supposed to be this last sentence. Nursing students need to know how to develop the paper based on APA style well enough to be able to finish most of the assignments that they have while they are in school. Okay, I admit, I said this right up front, APA style is an important thing for nursing students to know. It's important for us to know because we're going to see a lot of nursing students. However, I really doubt that's the number one thing that nurses need to know when they write. Nurses fill out medical charts, which means that the things that they write can kill someone. Their writing actually equals life or death. So I would say clarity and concision is probably the thing that nursing students need to know the most. So right away, I would be a little bit surprised that APA style is the thing that this student is focusing on. So then, we'll look throughout the rest of the paper. Okay, first body paragraph, her aunt came to Lipscomb, did not write an APA until she got in a nursing program. Next paragraph, she talks about how APA includes being concise and evidence-based. Then she talks about how her aunt did research papers. And then nurse practitioners have 4 major things that they need to do to get good grades. Her aunt at Vanderbilt, research paper, and talks about the methodology, which again is not specific to style. And you can see as we go through that the paper just really doesn't have any organization right now. So what you're going to spend your first 25-minute session on is developing an organizational pattern. Now, one resource that we have in the Writing Studio to help you with this, bear with me. Again, under Resources and Handouts, it is the Visual Essay Organizer. The Visual Essay Organizer is just a way to outline an essay without doing it in that traditional 7th grade way that students have such an aversion to. So you can write some ideas. You know, what are the ideas that come up in the paper over and over? Help the student brainstorm a thesis statement, but again, never give them one and never write down anything that you're saying. If you're talking, the student should be taking notes on this piece of paper. If the student is talking, you can take notes on this piece of paper. But never write down a thesis statement, a sample on their topic or anything like that, because that's where we get into some plagiarism issues. And then you can see that you can go through and fill out some ideas for, you know, the first 3 or 4 body paragraphs. But it gives the student an idea of what they should do when they leave. There's some really good information in this sample essay, but overall there's not a single strain of a thesis statement that goes through the paper. So in 25 minutes, if you can get to a good thesis statement that the student can leave and develop the paper around, that's a great way to spend that time. After that, then you might want to work on topic sentences for each paragraph and just making sure that each paragraph has a specific subject that supports the thesis. We are not in the 5-paragraph essay business, definitely. We want students to have a little bit of freedom as to how they write and to develop their own style. But you can see here that without this organization, you really don't know what the student's trying to say about nursing writing. If a student comes in and they do not have a thesis statement, and you can tell that there's not a lot of organization, it may be that you're looking at a rough draft where the student has written their way to their main idea at the end of the paper. So they've used the paper sort of like a brainstorming session to get to a conclusion paragraph that is actually more like an introduction. I think that's what's happened in this paper. So it's always a good idea, even if you don't see a thesis after you've read the paper, to go to that conclusion and maybe look for one there. Because there may be a sentence there that says exactly what the student has been trying to say throughout the whole paper. They just didn't get there until they had brainstormed all of their ideas out throughout the paper. Also at the end, you can see that this is not an appropriate works cited page. So you may want to just at least point that out to the student before she leaves so that she'll know that she needs to look up APA formatting and put it on a separate sheet of paper. There needs to be a page break there. So that's what you would start with if this were a paper that were brought into the Writing Studio in a first session. In your second session, there's lots of other things that would need to be worked on. I'm not sure if you noticed, but this is English as a second language speaker, so there are some issues with language, but for the most part, the organization is your first and primary concern.